Hello and welcome to another Creature tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to talk about IK, smooth IK motors, smooth IK rotate motors, and how to generate automated walk cycles. Sounds like a lot to cover, so let's just jump in. Now let's start with IK, and you're probably asking the question, how do I do IK in Creature? Is it possible? Well, of course it's possible, otherwise we wouldn't be having this tutorial. So if you notice, when you first start out rigging your Creature, when you click on any bone, it says FK motor. So by default, all bones have the FK or forward kinematics motor installed already, which means you can start animating them with forward kinematics, which is the simplest and most straightforward scheme for animation. You go in and drag the handles, and that changes where it orientates. If you drag the end handle, it changes where it's placed, right? Not very interesting, but that's FK for you. The next step up is to do IK, which is basically you want to have a chain of bones, like in this case, and all you want to do is to basically drag the target point of the end bone, and you hope that the rest of the bone chain will then pose accordingly based off your target position. How do we do that? Easy. Select the chain of bones, in this case all three bones, click on Install Motor, and let's click on IK Motor. Right. So now if you click on any of the bones that you just installed the motor on, it says IK Motor. And if you drag the handle, there you go. That is IK. That's IK in action. And you can animate this. You can drag it here. And if I move for a couple frames, if I drag it here, I play back, there. You see that that leg is following the target handle and poses in an IK fashion. So that's IK. There's a couple of things you can tweak here. You can change the valid IK angles. What is that? Well, let's try a couple of things. If we set it to negative, you see that it basically changes orientation. So a negative valid IK angle setting basically flips the allowable angles that this bone can twist. So this is the negative space. If we go to the positive space, it looks like this. So it's useful because you can change how things react, how things bend, and this is very, very important for limbs. Certain limbs bend this way in the positive direction, and certain limbs bend in the negative direction. Right, so that is IK, simple. Now at this point, you're probably wondering, well, that's IK, but what is smooth IK? You saw that smooth IK motor. What does that mean? So an IK motor by default works with any set of bones. However, do remember that the more bones you have for an IK chain, sometimes you might get motion snapping or instability. In other words, the resulting motion might not be as smooth as you expect. And the solution to that is to use a smooth IK motor, which will smooth out the motion and guarantees you an extremely stable and consistent IK animation at a slight expense of the loss in degrees of freedom. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and install a smooth IK motor. So, smooth IK motor. Now if I change it around, it doesn't look half bad actually, right? It almost performs exactly the same, but you notice that the curve has been smoothed out, so there's a bit of compression going on. However, the advantage of this motor is that it is stable no matter how many bones you attach to this motor. You can attach n number of bones and you're guaranteed to have a smooth curve that is stable and doesn't snap under animation. So that's something to consider. If you have too many bones or you want a more smoothed out motion, you should consider smooth IK motor. Otherwise, just stick to a regular IK motor. And the regular controls still apply. You can still change the valid IK angles from positive to negative. So that's the smooth IK motor. Right, so we've covered IK. Let's go into something more interesting. The question is, how do you go about generating a walk cycle? The obvious answer from most people is, well, I'm just going to install an IK or smooth IK motor, and I'm just going to go animate the walking motion, something like this. and I'm done. Well, that's one way to do it, but kind of tedious. Another way to do it in Creature is to use an IK rotate motor or a smooth IK rotate motor. Both of them functionally do the same things. Let's try a smooth IK rotate motor to see what I mean. Select all three bones. Click on Install Motor. Click Smooth IK Rotate Motor. Now click on the end bone. You notice this semicircular arc. What is it actually doing? Let's play the animation. You notice it's rotating around, but it's not just rotating around a random point. It's actually rotating about this arc, this handle arc that was defined. And we can change exactly how the shape of the handle is, the arc is. If we change the height to 2 and we play it back, you notice it traces out that semicircle, right? So that's kind of interesting. And you can already see how useful this thing actually is. Let's reinstall the motor at the first frame, because I installed it at the second frame. And I want to sort of just tweak values at the first key frame. So let's do that again. Right. Okay. So there you go. Let's up the value to 3 and play it back. Right. See, it traces out this circular motion, and that's almost like a walk cycle, right? Of course, a real walk cycle doesn't actually just trace a circle. It's more like a semicircle because you have a flat ground over here. So there's a couple of parameters you can tweak in the rotate motor, IK rotate motors, to help you achieve that goal. You could tweak scale bottom. This determines how much the bottom part of the circle is scaled. Now, if we wanted a ground, a flat ground, we just tweak it to set it to 0. And there you go, a flat semicircular motion. There you go. So now it looks like the leg is launching off the ground. There's much more other interesting parameters, shaping parameters you can tweak as well. You can tweak scale right. I can say I want it to rotate a bit less in the right hand side of the circle. If I set it to 0.5, you notice the circle is scaled 0.5 in the positive part of the circle. Now if I play it, it traces exactly that new semicircular squashed arc that we have. So you see, with tweaking these things like scale left, scale right, scale top, and scale bottom will allow you to tweak the arc that this leg is rotating. And that's how we achieve an automated walk cycle. Right. So let's set the scale right back to 1 for the purposes of this demo. Okay, so that's one leg, and your obvious answer is, well, let's do it for the other leg and we get a free walking motion. Let's do that. Let's set the appropriate height and the appropriate scale bottom. Right, let's play the animation. Not quite what we were expecting, but really that's the expected result. What's going on here? Well, we installed 2 similar IK rotate motors on the 2 chain of bones with the same parameters. So, of course, they're going to rotate in unison. Of course, a walk cycle isn't in unison. A walk cycle has 2 legs out of sync or out of phase with each other. That's precisely what we need. So we need to go in and tweak the phase parameter. Now, what I want to do is click on one of the chain of bones and look at the phase parameter. Phase 0 means that the motion is going to start, say, at the beginning of the circle and traces that arc. If I change the value of the phase, it's going to start at a different location on this circular arc. So setting different values for phase essentially allows you to make the motion out of phase. Let's give it a go. You'll see what I mean. Let's put a phase of 0.5. Play it back. Now you see this bone is now slightly more out of sync. It's no longer in unison with the original bone rotate motor. So we're almost getting some kind of walk cycle, but looks like that value wasn't high enough. Let's increase that. Let's try 1.2. See what happens. There you go. We have an automated walk cycle. Very cool. So all we did was set a single set of knot values on the first frame, and we got this cool rotational walk cycle for free. So remember, you can use smooth IK rotate motors or IK rotate motors to easily get your walk cycle without too much effort. And you can tweak the shaping parameters to get what you need. And remember to set different phases so that the two legs go out of sync and you have a walking motion. And of course, there's other parameters you can tweak here. In particular, speed determines how quickly the rotational motion traverses the arc. You can already imagine what it does. So if you wanted a much faster walking motion, you would up this speed parameter. And that's really basically it. That covers our tutorial for IK, smooth IK, and all kinds of IK rotate motors. We've also covered the fact that you can generate automated walking cycles with the usage of two IK rotate motors on two legs and setting out of phase values in the phase parameters for the legs. And that's it. Happy animating!